The distress signal traveled through the cold emptiness of space, carried with it the desperate cries of a dying world. In the grand marble halls of the Galactic Council Station, hundreds of alien representatives from across the galaxy gathered in their floating crystal pods, their various forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes against the pristine white walls. Ambassador Velcrin stood at the center of the chamber, his tall, thin body shaking with fear. His people, the Veltar, were known throughout the galaxy for their brilliant minds and gentle hearts. Their translucent skin glowed softly blue when they were calm, but now it flickered with rapid pulses of orange and red, colors that meant terror and desperation. Honored council members, Velcrin's voice cracked as he spoke into the transmission device. I come before you today not as a proud representative of my people, but as a beggar pleading for the lives of my family and friends. The chamber fell silent. Even the soft humming of the translation devices seemed to quiet as every being focused on the trembling ambassador. 3 days ago, pirates from the Krex Syndicate attacked our research colony on Kepler 442b. They came without warning, their black ships appearing like death itself in our peaceful skies. We had no weapons, no soldiers, no way to fight back. We are scientists, teachers, and explorers, not warriors. Velcrin's hand shook as he activated a holographic display. Images of his home colony appeared in the air above him. Beautiful crystal buildings surrounded by gardens of alien flowers, laboratories filled with peaceful researchers working on projects to better the galaxy, and schools where young Veltar learned about the wonders of the universe. Then the images changed. Burned buildings, bodies floating in space. The elegant research stations now looked like broken toys scattered by an angry child. They have taken 200 of our people hostage, Velcrin continued, his voice growing weaker with each word. Men, women, children. It does not matter to these monsters. They have demanded that we give them all of our research data, our star maps, and our most advanced technology. And to show they are serious, the hologram changed again. 12 bodies floated in the darkness of space, their translucent forms no longer glowing with life. Gasps and cries of horror echoed through the chamber as the council members saw the executed hostages. One death every solar cycle until we surrender everything, Velcrin whispered. But if we give them what they want, they will use our knowledge to hurt others. Our research could be turned into weapons. Our star maps could lead them to defenseless worlds. We cannot be responsible for that kind of destruction. Counselor Thren, an ancient being whose species had lived among the stars for thousands of years, leaned forward in his floating pod. What of your own defense forces? Surely your people have some way to protect themselves. Velcrin's glow dimmed to almost nothing. We have never needed weapons. For 500 years, we have lived in peace. Our bodies are not built for fighting. Our bones break easily, our skin tears like paper. We trusted in the goodness of others and protection of council law. We were fools. The nearest council fleet is under Admiral Kethvar, announced another council member, checking his data pad. They are currently engaged in peacekeeping operations in the Outer Rim. Even if they left immediately, it would take them 3 weeks to reach your colony. 3 weeks, Velcrin repeated, the words falling from his lips like stones. 63 more of my people will die before help arrives. Mothers, fathers, children who have never hurt anyone in their lives. The chamber erupted in discussion as the various alien species debated among themselves. Some suggested negotiating with the pirates. Others wanted to send a diplomatic mission. A few called for economic sanctions against any world that traded with the Krex Syndicate. But all of these solutions would take time that the hostages did not have. In the back of the chamber, in a section reserved for the most ancient and wise council members, Counselor Thren sat quietly. His 4 eyes were closed in deep thought, and his tentacle-like arms moved slowly as he accessed old files in the council's most secure databases. Files that most beings had forgotten existed. Files about a species that had been deliberately excluded from galactic civilization. There is one option, Thren whispered, his voice so quiet that the translation devices barely picked it up. The chamber fell silent as every being turned to look at the ancient counselor. Thren had lived through 3 galactic wars and had seen the rise and fall of entire civilizations. When he spoke, others listened. The humans, he said, the words hanging in the air like a curse. A collective gasp rippled through the chamber. Several council members actually floated backward in their pods, as if the very mention of the name had physically pushed them away. Humans, the legendary Deathworlders from the Forbidden Soul System. Stories about them were told throughout the galaxy, tales of being so violent and unpredictable that they had turned their homeworld's most dangerous predators into loyal companions. Creatures that could survive in environments that would kill most other species. Warriors who had developed hundreds of different ways to end life and seemed to enjoy the challenge of battle. Impossible, protested Counselor Zeth, her crystalline form flashing with angry red light. They are too dangerous, too unpredictable. We banned them from our space for good reason. They are monsters, added another voice from the crowd. They solve every problem with violence. They cannot be controlled or reasoned with. But Velcrin looked up with the first spark of hope he had felt in days. Please, he begged. I don't care if they are monsters. I don't care if they are dangerous. My people are dying and nothing else matters. Thren activated his communication system with one of his tentacles while the chamber continued to debate deep in the council's archives. He found what he was looking for, a communication frequency that had not been used in over 50 years. A direct line to Earth. The emergency transmission was sent toward the Forbidden Soul System before anyone could stop him, carrying with it the desperate hope of a dying colony and the last chance for 200 innocent lives. In the darkness of space, the signal traveled toward a small blue planet where the most dangerous species in the galaxy waited for someone to give them a reason to leave their home. The alarm bells rang through the corridors of Earth's orbital defense station like the heartbeat of a giant metal beast. Captain Minho was drinking his morning coffee when the emergency signal came in, the hot liquid spilling across his desk as he jumped to his feet. The transmission was unlike anything they had received before. Alien voices speaking in panic, begging for help from across the galaxy. In the briefing room of the TDF Retribution, Earth's most advanced military ship, Captain Minho stood before a holographic display that showed star systems so far away they looked like tiny dots of light. His hands, marked with scars from a dozen battles, moved across the glowing controls as he studied the information that had just arrived from space. The room was filled with his team, for humans who had been hand-picked for their skills and their ability to do what others could not. These were not ordinary soldiers. These were the best of the best, the ones other humans called when the job seemed impossible. Sergeant Jiwoo sat at the far end of the metal table, her fingers playing with small explosive devices like they were toys. She was a small woman with short black hair and eyes that seemed to smile even when her mouth did not. Her job was simple: blow things up. She was very good at her job. Too good, some people said, because she enjoyed it too much. Corporal Hygiene was almost invisible in her chair, her thin body dressed in dark clothes that seemed to blend into the shadows. She could move through air vents and crawl spaces like a ghost, appearing where no one expected her to be. Her teammates joked that she was part spider, but they only made that joke when they were sure she was not listening. With Hygiene, you could never be sure. Private Taemin was cleaning his rifle with the careful attention of someone who loved his weapon more than most people love their families. His hands moved with practiced ease, checking every part of the gun that had never missed its target in 3 years of service. He was a quiet man who spoke only when necessary, but his rifle spoke for him when words were not enough. Listen carefully, Captain Minho said, his voice filling the room with authority. We have received a distress call from an alien species called the Veltar. Their research colony has been attacked by pirates. 200 innocent people are being held hostage. He touched the holographic controls, and images appeared in the air above the table. Pictures of tall, thin aliens with translucent skin that glowed softly blue. They looked fragile, like they might break if someone spoke too loudly. Then the images changed to show their colony. Beautiful crystal buildings surrounded by gardens, laboratories filled with scientific equipment, and schools where alien children learned about the stars. These people are scientists and teachers. Minho continued. They have never hurt anyone. They do not have weapons or armies. They trusted that the galaxy was a safe place, and now they are paying for that trust with their lives. The next images made even these hardened soldiers grow quiet. 12 bodies floating in the darkness of space. Their blue glow faded to nothing. The pirates had killed them to make a point, to show that they were serious about their demands. The pirates are from something called the Krex Syndicate, Minho explained, bringing up new images. These showed large, brutish aliens with thick skin and multiple arms. They looked like they had been built for fighting, with natural armor plating and sharp claws. 17 of them, led by someone called Warlord Thax. They are killing one hostage every day until their demands are met. Jiwoo stopped playing with her explosives and looked up with interest. What kind of demands? They want all of the Veltar research data, star maps, and advanced technology. If the aliens give them what they want, these pirates will use that knowledge to attack other innocent worlds. If they do not give them what they want, 200 people will die slowly. Tae-min looked up from his rifle for the first time since the briefing began. What does the Galactic Council want us to do? Minho almost smiled at that question. That is the interesting part. The Galactic Council did not officially ask for our help. In fact, they have spent the last 50 years telling everyone in the galaxy that humans are too dangerous to be allowed in civilized space. They call us monsters. They say we are too violent and cannot be trusted. But they called us anyway. Hygiene said quietly from shadows. They called us because they have no choice, Minho replied. Their nearest military force is 3 weeks away. By the time help arrives, all the hostages will be dead. They need someone who can get there fast and deal with the problem immediately. Jiwoo grinned, and it was a kind of smile that made smart people step backward. So they finally admit they need the monsters. The transmission came with warnings. Minho continued, pulling up text on the holographic display. They told us to use minimal force. They asked us to try negotiation first. They reminded us that the galaxy is watching and that any excessive violence will reflect badly on Earth's reputation. The 4 team members looked at each other and started laughing. It was not a happy laugh. It was the kind of laugh that said they had heard something so foolish they could not believe it. Minimal force, Tae-min repeated slowly, as if he was testing how the words tasted. Against pirates who are murdering innocent people. They want us to negotiate, Jiwoo added, still grinning. With killers who have already proven they do not care about life. Hygiene spoke from her corner, her voice soft but carrying clearly through the room. They think they can control how we work. They think they can tell monsters how to hunt. Captain Minho nodded and touched the controls again. The holographic display changed to show their ship's route to the distant star system. ETA to Kepler, 442b, is 36 hours. Hygiene, I want you to study everything we have about that research station. Find me ways in and ways out. Find me weak points. Already started, she replied, her fingers dancing over her personal data pad. Tae-min, what is your assessment of 17 targets in a fortified position? The sniper looked up from his rifle and shrugged. 17 targets means 17 shots. Maybe 18 if one of them is lucky enough to need a second bullet. Jiwoo, can you breach their defenses? The demolitions expert held up one of her explosive charges. Captain, I can breach anything. The question is how much of the station you want left standing when I am done. Minho walked to front of the room and looked out through the reinforced window at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, innocent people were dying while their captors laughed and made demands. Somewhere out there, pirates thought they could threaten the helpless and face no consequences. They were about to learn why humanity had earned its reputation as the galaxy's monsters. Gear up, Minho ordered. Full combat loadout. We leave in 1 hour. As his team prepared for battle, Captain Minho thought about the warnings in the alien transmission. The Galactic Council was worried about human violence. They were afraid of what people would think if Earth's soldiers were too harsh with the pirates. They clearly did not understand what they had asked for. The TDF retribution appeared in the Kepler 442b system like a ghost materializing from the void. One moment there was only empty space around the distant research station, and the next moment a sleek human warship hung in the darkness, its black hull almost invisible against the stars. The transition from hyperspace to normal space was so smooth it seemed like magic, but it was really just human engineering at its finest. Captain Minho stood on the bridge of his ship, watching the tactical displays that showed him everything he needed to know about the situation ahead. The Veltar research station looked like a beautiful crystal flower floating in space, its multiple sections connected by transparent tubes that allowed people to move between different areas. It should have been a place of learning and discovery, but now it had become a prison. The Krex pirates had turned the peaceful research station into a fortress. Energy shields surrounded the entire structure, glowing blue barriers that could stop most weapons from getting through. Automated defense turrets pointed outward like the spikes on a dangerous animal, ready to shoot at anything that came too close. The pirates had clearly spent time preparing for a fight, and they had done their job well. "Scanning complete, Captain," reported Lieutenant Park from the sensor station. "I count 17 life signs that match Krex biological patterns. They are spread throughout the station, with the largest concentration in the central laboratory section. That is also where I am detecting the Veltar hostages." Minho nodded, studying the three-dimensional map that appeared above his command chair. The pirates had put the hostages in the most defensible part of the station, surrounded by thick walls and multiple layers of security. It was smart tactics. Anyone trying to rescue the prisoners would have to fight through the entire facility first. "Communications. Open a channel on standard frequencies," Minho ordered. The young communications officer at her station nodded and began working her controls. "Channel open, sir. You are broadcasting to the entire system." Minho stepped forward, his voice calm and professional as he spoke into the microphone. "Warlord Thax, this is Captain Minho of the Terran Defense Force. You are holding innocent civilians against their will and have committed acts of murder. Release the hostages immediately and surrender yourselves for justice." The response came quickly, and it was exactly what Minho had expected. Harsh laughter filled the bridge speakers, the sound like metal scraping against stone. When the laughter finally stopped, a deep voice spoke in broken galactic standard. "Humans!" the voice roared with amusement. "So the galaxy's boogeyman finally shows its face. I am Warlord Thax of the Krex Syndicate, and I am not afraid of your reputation, Deathworlder." Through the main view screen, Minho could see the research station more clearly now. Floating around in the cold vacuum of space were 12 small objects that made his jaw tighten with controlled anger. 12 bodies in research clothing, their translucent skin no longer glowing with life. The pirates had thrown their victims out into space like garbage, leaving them to drift as a warning to anyone who might try to interfere. "You see those corpses, human?" Thax continued, his voice full of cruel satisfaction. "That is what happens to those who defy the Krex Syndicate. You are outnumbered and outgunned. Your single ship against my fortified position and my 17 warriors. Surrender now, or watch these research insects die slowly, one by one, while you float helplessly in your metal coffin." Minho looked around his bridge at his crew. They were all young humans, born and raised in the colonies around Earth, but they had the same look in their eyes that it had seen in soldiers throughout human history. It was the look of people who had seen innocents murdered and were ready to do something about it. "Negative," Minho replied, his voice as cold as the space around them. "We do not negotiate with pirates." The communication channel went silent for a moment, and Minho could almost hear the confusion in that silence. Clearly, Thax had expected threats or bargaining or some attempt at diplomacy. The idea that someone would simply refuse to negotiate seemed to surprise him. Behind the captain, Sergeant Jawu was already moving toward the equipment lockers, her hand selecting plasma charges and breach explosives with the practiced ease of someone who had done this many times before. She was humming softly to herself, a cheerful tune that did not match the deadly nature of her preparations. "How do you want to play this, Captain?" she asked without looking up from her work. Minho studied the tactical display one more time, noting the positions of the automated turrets and the layout of the station's corridors. The Krex had prepared for a conventional attack, the kind of siege warfare that most civilized species preferred, where large fleets would surround a target and demand surrender, where negotiations could go on for days or weeks while both sides tried to find a peaceful solution. Unfortunately for the pirates, Humans had stopped fighting conventional wars thousands of years ago, back when their ancestors had decided that the best way to hunt mammoths was not to fight them fairly, but to dig pits and use spears and coordinate their attacks like a pack of wolves. We go in fast and quiet. Minho announced his team. Ji-Woo, you are breach and clear. I want those shields down and their defenses neutralized. Hygiene, infiltration through the ventilation network. You are our inside advantage. Tae-Min, overwatch and precision elimination of any targets that present themselves. Corporal Hygiene looked up from the station schematics she had been studying. The ventilation system connects all sections of the facility. I can move through the entire station without being seen, as long as the pirates do not know to look for me. Private Tae-Min was field stripping his rifle for the third time, checking every component with the obsessive attention of a true professional. 17 targets in a confined space. I will need clear sight lines for maximum efficiency. You will get them, Minho promised. I will take point and draw their attention. Once we are inside, we move fast and we move hard. No hesitation, no second chances. The team moved with practiced efficiency, each person understanding exactly what their job would be without needing detailed explanations. They had worked together for 2 years, fighting pirates and rebels in the outer colonies, and they functioned like a single organism with 4 different specialized parts. Across the galaxy, various alien species were monitoring the situation through long-range sensors and intercepted communications. Most of them expected this to turn into a long standoff, with hours or days of negotiations while the two sides tried to find a solution that would save face for everyone involved. They had no concept of human military doctrine. They did not understand that humans had built their entire approach to warfare around 3 simple principles. Hit the enemy where they do not expect it. Hit them harder than they think is possible, and never give them time to recover from the first blow. The Krex pirates were about to receive a practical lesson in why the galaxy had spent 50 years telling stories about the monsters from the Sol system. The attack began like lightning striking from a clear sky. One moment, the Veltar research station hung peacefully in space, its blue energy shields glowing softly around the crystal structure. The next moment, explosions bloomed across its hull like deadly flowers, sending pieces of metal spinning into the darkness. Sergeant Ji-Woo had placed her shaped charges with the precision of a surgeon and creativity of an artist. The first explosion punched through the station's outer wall, but it was not the main event. The second explosion, larger and brighter, tore through the shield generator room, like an angry god reaching down from space. The blue barriers that had protected the pirates flickered once and died, leaving the station naked and vulnerable. Inside the facility, emergency lights began flashing red as alarms screamed through corridors. The Krex pirates, who had been relaxing in what they thought was an impregnable fortress, suddenly found themselves stumbling through smoke-filled hallways while their ears rang from the explosions. "What happened?" roared Warlord Thax into his communicator. "Report. Someone tell me what is happening." But there was no answer from the shield generator room. The 3 pirates who had been stationed there were now just memories and scattered pieces of armor, floating in the vacuum of space. In the chaos that followed the explosions, something else slipped into the station. Something small and quiet that moved through the ventilation shafts like smoke drifting through a house. Corporal Hygiene had entered the facility through a breach so small that most people would not have believed a human could fit through it. But Hygiene was not most people. The ventilation system of the research station had been designed for the thin, fragile bodies of the Veltar scientists. The ducts were narrow and cramped, suitable for moving air, but not for living creatures. The Krex pirates, with their thick bodies and heavy armor, could never have used these passages. They had never even considered that an enemy might try. Hygiene moved through the metal tunnels like a ghost, her small form sliding silently past fans and filters. She could hear the pirates below her, shouting orders and running to the corridors as they tried to figure out what was happening. Their heavy boots made so much noise that she could track their movements without even looking. Outside the station, Private Tae-Min had positioned himself on a piece of floating debris that gave him a perfect view of the facility's windows and airlocks. His rifle was a work of art, a precision instrument that could put a bullet exactly where he wanted it from distances that other species considered impossible. His first target was a communications array, a cluster of dishes and transmitters on the station's outer hull. The shot was clean and simple, the high-powered round smashing through the delicate equipment, and leaving the pirates unable to call for help or coordinate their defense. His second shot was more personal. Through a porthole window, he could see a large Krex warrior with extra armor markings that indicated high rank. This was probably Thax's second-in-command, the one giving orders while his boss tried to figure out what was happening. The window was made of reinforced transparent aluminum, designed to withstand the pressure of space and the impact of small meteorites. It was not designed to withstand a human sniper round fired at close range. The bullet punched through the window like it was made of soap, and the pirate behind it simply stopped existing. Captain Minho entered the station to the main breach that Ji-Woo had created, but he did not follow the obvious path through the corridors. Instead, he moved through maintenance areas and service tunnels, appearing in places where the pirates did not think to look. He was like a shark swimming through dark water, invisible until the moment he struck. The first group of Krex he encountered were 3 pirates trying to set up a defensive position in the main corridor. They had overturned tables and activated personal shields, creating what they thought was a strong defensive line. They were watching the main entrance, expecting human soldiers to come charging through like the barbarians they had heard stories about. Instead, Minho appeared behind them, emerging from a maintenance hatch that should have been too small for a human. His weapon spoke 3 times in rapid succession, and the defensive position became a tomb. "Contact rear section," one of the surviving pirates said into his communicator, his voice shaking with fear. "We need backup at." His transmission was cut short as Hygiene emerged from a ventilation grate directly behind him. The pirate never knew what hit him. One moment he was calling for help, and the next moment he was falling to the floor while a small human woman disappeared back into the walls like she had never been there at all. Throughout the station, the pattern repeated itself. Pirates would report enemy contact, ask for reinforcements, or try to establish defensive positions. Then their voices would simply stop, cut off in mid-sentence as Tae-Min's rifle spoke in the darkness, or as one of the human soldiers appeared where no enemy should be able to reach. Defensive positions at Junction 7. Another pirate managed to say before his transmission ended forever. Warlord Thax stood in his command center, watching his tactical display with growing horror. Each of his warriors was represented by a small blinking light on the screen, and those lights were going out one by one. First 3 lights disappeared when the shield generator exploded. Then another light vanished from the communications room. Then 2 more from the main corridor. Then 1 from Junction 7. In less than 10 minutes, he had lost half of his force. He could hear explosions and gunfire echoing through the station, but when he tried to contact his warriors, there was only silence. It was like his people were being swallowed by the darkness itself. "Fall back!" He finally roared into his communicator. "All units, fall back to the laboratory. Defend the hostages." But there was no response. The communications array was destroyed, and most of his warriors were already dead. The few survivors were too busy running for their lives to answer his orders. This was not how battles were supposed to work. In all his years of piracy, Thax had fought against species who valued their own lives, who moved carefully and tried to minimize casualties. Civilized enemies who followed rules and gave warnings before they attacked. These humans were something else entirely. They moved like predators who had been hunting dangerous prey for millions of years. They appeared where they should not be able to go, struck where defenses were weakest, and showed no mercy to anyone who stood in their way. In desperation, Thax gathered the last of his surviving warriors and fell back to the central laboratory where the Veltar hostages were being held. It was the most secure part of the station, with thick walls and multiple layers of defense. If he could not win this battle, at least he could make the humans pay a price for their victory. "Humans!" he roared into his communicator, hoping the message would reach them somehow. "I have 50 hostages here. Approach, and they die. You hear me, Deathworlders? Come any closer, and I will execute them all." The response was silence. No threats, no negotiations, no demands. The central laboratory of the Veltar research station looked like a battlefield frozen in time. Broken equipment lay scattered across the floor. Sparking cables hung from the ceiling like dead snakes, and the smell of smoke filled the air. In the center of this chaos, the last act of a deadly drama was about to unfold. Captain Minho stepped to the damaged doorway with his hands held away from his weapons, but every line of his body spoke of controlled violence ready to explode into action. His dark eyes swept across the room, taking in every detail in the space a heartbeat. 63 Veltar scientists huddled behind overturned tables and broken machinery, their translucent skin flickered with the rapid orange pulses that meant terror. These gentle beings had never seen real violence before, and the past few days had shattered their peaceful world forever. At the center of the laboratory stood Warlord Thax, and even among his own brutal species, he was a giant. His thick, armored hide was scarred from a dozen battles, and his forearms ended in claws that could tear through metal. In one massive hand, he held a plasma rifle pointed directly at the head of a young Veltar scientist. The alien researcher looked barely old enough to have finished his education, his large eyes wide with the kind of fear that came from knowing death was only a trigger pull away. "One step closer, Deathworlder, and I execute them all," Thax snarled, his voice echoing to the damaged laboratory. His multiple eyes darted constantly between Minho and the various entrances to the room, searching for the trap he knew had to be coming. "You think you are clever, killing my warriors like cowards in the dark? But now I have what you want, and you have to play by my rules." Minho stopped exactly where he was, his expression calm and unreadable. To the terrified hostages, he looked almost relaxed, but Thax had enough experience with violence to recognize the signs of a predator preparing to strike. The human stillness was not peaceful. It was a quiet moment before lightning struck. Around the room, barely visible in the shadows and smoke, the rest of the human team moved into position. Sergeant Jiwoo had found a position near the rear exits, her explosives ready to seal off any escape route. Somewhere in the ventilation system above, Corporal Hygiene waited like a spider in her web, ready to drop down at the perfect moment. Through a damaged porthole, the faint glint of Private Taemin's scope caught the light for just an instant before disappearing back into darkness. "You want safe passage," Minho said, his voice as steady as if he were discussing the weather. It was not a question. It was simply a recognition of what any cornered animal would want. "Smart for a savage," Thax replied, pressing his weapon harder against the young scientist's head. The Veltar whimpered, a sound so filled with terror that even some of the other hostages began to cry. "I want my ship fueled and ready. I want supplies and a 12-hour head start before anyone follows me. These research insects live if you cooperate." The laboratory fell silent, except for quiet sobbing of the hostages and the distant hum of damaged equipment. This was the moment when civilized species would begin to negotiate. This was when reasonable beings would discuss terms and find compromises that allowed everyone to walk away with their dignity intact. Throughout the galaxy, this was how these situations were resolved, with words and patience, and the understanding that life was precious and should be preserved when possible. The Veltar hostages looked back and forth between the human captain and their captor, hope and despair fighting for control of their thoughts. They had heard the stories about humans, the tales of violence and brutality that made parents tell their children to behave. But they had also seen these same humans fight through an entire station full of pirates to reach them. Surely beings capable of such dedication would not let innocent people die over pride or politics. Minho's response came without warning and without mercy. The plasma bolt that disabled Thax's weapon appeared to come from thin air, fired from an angle that should have been impossible. The shot passed so close to the young Veltar's head that it singed the fabric of his research coat, but it did not touch his skin. The precision required for such a shot was beyond the imagination of most species, but humans have been making impossible shots since they first learned to throw rocks at running prey. Before Warlord Thax could even begin to understand what had happened, Captain Minho was on him. The human moved like flowing water, covering the distance between them in the time it took to blink. Thax was twice the size of his opponent and had been fighting battles since before Minho was born, but size and experience meant nothing when facing a predator who had turned combat into an art form. The Krex warlord's massive form crashed to the deck with a sound like thunder, his forearms twisted behind his back in a hold that would break bones if he tried to struggle. Minho knelt on his back with one knee, applying just enough pressure to keep the giant pirate helpless without killing him. "Secure the prisoners," Minho ordered calmly, as if he just finished a routine training exercise instead of ending a hostage crisis. Medical teams to the laboratory. His team materialized from their hiding places like ghosts becoming solid. Jiwoo appeared from behind a pile of debris, her weapons ready to deal with any remaining threats. Hygiene dropped down from a ventilation grate in the ceiling, landing silently beside a group of hostages who gasped in surprise. Through the damaged porthole, Taemin's rifle barrel became visible as he maintained overwatch on the surrounding corridors. The rescue was over. In less than 6 hours from their arrival in the system, the humans had destroyed an entire pirate operation, freed all the hostages, and captured their leader alive. Most galactic military forces would have needed days or weeks to accomplish the same mission, and they would have lost dozens of their own soldiers in the process. As medical teams from a human ship began treating the freed Veltar scientists, Ambassador Velkrin approached Captain Minho with steps that trembled from exhaustion and relief. The alien's translucent skin was now glowing with soft blue patterns that meant gratitude and wonder. "Captain Minho," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I must ask you something that I do not understand. Why did you come here? Why did you risk your lives for strangers from across the galaxy? Your species gains nothing from helping us." The human captain looked through the damaged porthole at the stars beyond, his expression thoughtful. Around them, his team worked with quiet efficiency to secure the station and tend to the wounded. They moved like people who had done this kind of work many times before, but there was no joy in their faces, no celebration of victory. They took no pleasure in the violence they had committed. They simply saw it as a job that needed to be done. "Because someone had to," Minho finally replied, his words simple but carrying the weight of absolute conviction. "That is what we do." The news of the rescue spread to the galaxy faster than light itself, carried by quantum communication networks that connected every civilized world.